Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News on the South Florida Conservative News Service. Wednesday, February 4th, quarter to 2 p.m. in the afternoon. The cold is going away, and we're going to talk about the Chinese and what liars they are. This goes along with our longer form, the Chinese, what liars they are, and I'll tell you why. But we're going to concentrate on one of the newer things I've heard in the last few days, which was China is the leader in world renewables, meaning wind power, uh, solar, whatever. And they are so far ahead, and we really have to hurry to catch up to them. And it makes absolutely no sense to me for a number of reasons. One, public disclosure. Years ago, I had gotten the certification to inspect uh, solar arrays. It's a couple day class, but it was fun. And I thought it was going to be a big boom where I was until I realized the sun is not the same everywhere on the planet. And that is wherein lies the lies of the Chinese. So every few weeks, as we say, we're told the same thing about how great the Chinese are and got a big navy and their penis size is larger than our penis size, if you listen to South Park. And all that stuff. They are a world leader in renewable energy. They are winning the green transition for shipping as well. And gigawatts, solar panels, wind turbines, broccoli, whatever else, endless drone shots, airplanes that don't come apart like their airplanes do now, aircraft carriers that actually can launch aircraft, which they can't do now. But let's talk about the green lie because that gets you back to the Obama administration and all that shit from back then. Boy, don't we miss him, right? Because when you look past these headlines, past the past press releases and the ESG scorecards, it is not an energy miracle, but something far more familiar. A shell game, as we used to say, an industrial strategy, if you wanted to be kind, and it is basically a propaganda operation dressed up as environmental virtue. So here's how it works. You start with the trick that makes everything else possible. When China is described as the world's renewable leader, the metric almost always used is installed capacity. How many panels, how many turbines, how many gigawatts on paper. What is rarely ever emphasized is how much money, how much electricity is actually delivered reliably, economically, and where it's needed. And that is a distinction that really matters when you're talking about this stuff because solar and wind are not like coal, gas, or nuclear. I can't drag the sun to an area where I need it or the wind to an area where that needs it and things like that. They are geographic technologies. Their value depends on where they are built, when they produce, and whether the grid can absorb the power. Okay? Very simple stuff. And if you were to do your own home, those of you in the United States, they would show you like a shadow where part of your house is in shadow and what part isn't. And that's all goes into what value solar power would have to you, where you are on the latitude and longitudinal lines, things of that nature. So if you're counting square meters of panels instead of using usable kilowatt hours, that's like, as I said, measuring a navy by the tonnage of steel, not whether the ships can sail. China didn't stumble into this. It has embraced this kind of thing because they know that, especially mainstream media, is stupid and lazy and wouldn't even scratch the surface. This is what we're talking about now would take you 5 to 10 minutes to go and look up on your own. And yet people are touting it and giving them billions of dollars based on a lie. China's best solar and wind resources are in the western and northwestern part of the country, out in Tibet, Mongolia, places that are like hot spots, right? No. From a pure physics standpoint, they are actually, they are good places because high sun, you need high sun exposure. If you're doing wind, you want strong, consistent winds. The land is cheap. There's few local objections, But from a power system standpoint, that makes it deeply problematic. If there's no locals complaining, it's because there's no locals. The population, the industry, and electricity demand are concentrated along the eastern and southeastern coast, which is thousands of miles away. So that means the power would have to travel a vast distance through fragile transmission corridors, which they don't have, across provincial jurisdictions that often protect their own coal mines first, because why not? Everybody's a warlord, right? And the result you have is what's called curtailment, the energy that could be generated but isn't used. In some regions and some years, 20 to 30% of wind or solar output is simply thrown away. If it was gas, we would say we were flaring it. That's not leadership. That's misallocation on an industrial scale. If you did that in the United States, they would make you mayor of Minneapolis, right? Curtailment is the one number that cuts through the propaganda. If recyclables or renewables were truly being built to meet real demand efficiently, curtailment would be rare and shrinking. Instead, it persists if does not grow. And that is because in China's system, the transmission often lags way behind the construction of that facility. The grid operators prioritize coal for stability. Storage is expensive and limited. The products themselves are not the greatest. Buy yourself a few Chinese solar panels and see how great they really are versus the Japanese or the Germans. Okay. Political targets matter more than performance. The panels go up, the turbine spins sometimes. The point was never perfect delivery. It's so they can show a photograph of this giant field covered with panels or a mountain that's covered with wind turbines. And they can go to their investors and say, look at how great we are. And we are doing all this that's right by the earth and all this kind of shit. And it's just a total nonsense sandwich. And this is where the story becomes global because China's renewables boom, okay, I'm going to keep air quoting boom, coincided perfectly with the explosion of ESG investing and climate linked development financing in the West. So they proved the West's argument about how great this shit was, while the West was busy robbing their own people through carbon credits and the Kyoto Protocol. Pension funds, sovereign fund, green bonds, uh, multilateral traders and lenders, all were hungry for big biological projects like this, government backed, climate aligned narratives. China delivered exactly what they needed. Installed capacity, unlocked capital. Okay. Nobody bothered to see if this thing could start a light bulb or not. Once the panel's installed, the box is checked. Whether electricity actually comes out of it or gets used is somebody else's problem. Western capital got its green badge. China got cheap financing, and everybody, victory. So the part that nobody really says is China's renewable build out was never just about electricity. It was once again, as they can't stop themselves, about industrial dominance. Solar and wind allowed China to subsidize domestic manufacturers because that's where all the shit was made and crush Western competitors, which is where all the shit is not made, except for Germany and Japan. It controlled the polysilicon wafers, modules, inverters. It locked in the global supply chain. So if we wanted them here in the United States, if I were to build them in the United States, it would be very costly because they have all the parts that you need tied up in their own system and they're not going to share. So the one thing is, though, overbuilding at home, as we would call it, was not a mistake to the Chinese. It was a weapon for them to use in trade against everybody else who now, since we proved the fake story or the hypothesis that didn't exist, wanted these panels. So excess capacity, which is what the Chinese had, drove the prices down, which destroyed foreign firms and ensured that any green transition elsewhere would depend on Chinese factories. The panels wasted in deserts, right, still served a purpose. They won the manufacturing war, which as I said, we could have used solar to some extent down here in South Florida because of the cost, and we have to subsidize everything, which honestly, Florida Power and Light should be subsidizing everything. They should buy me a freaking car the way they behave. But the fact of the matter is, China perched itself in such a situation that if you say solar, they say China. That's not going to change anytime soon. Renewables also serve another function, which is resource anchoring, okay, which goes along with this thing with the overbuild. Once the land is designated a renewable base, it becomes politically untouchable. In a lot of places, we have it here in the United States too. It's economically locked in, and it's a justification for mineral extraction. That's what they do in China. Rare earths, copper, lithium. The green label provides cover for long-term control of land and materials crucial to future industries. So it's not environmentalism. They say, "Oh, I put all this green energy out, but I'm going to dig under it and I'm going to, blast this mountain to pieces looking for copper or lithium." But don't worry, we've got it covered because the green generation thing here more than compensates for the strip mining that I'm involved in. It doesn't, but it does in the world. Okay. And the greatest perception of all this, high sulfur coal, which is what China lives on, it never went away. They are still the number one polluter in the world, probably. They continue to build and operate coal plants at scale because they have to stabilize these grids and they have to backstop these renewables because when the sun's down, nothing's running, right? And the sun's only running at a certain amount. It's not a consistent voltage. There's a lot of things that go into it, which is why it's a nice also ran if you have battery banks in your house. And those of you who can afford them, especially down here, knowing the hurricane season, and there are some benefits to it, I would still look into it. But it's not going to run your house forever. It will take the bell part of the bell curve out of your electric bill, that's for sure. And nobody sells it that way. It's a damn shame. There's good products out there, but it's not our problem right now, right? So in practice, these renewables are layered on top of coal, not replacing it. Because with them, there is no bump to take out. There is a deep hole when the sun's not out. And then the power plants have to bring it back up to a flat line or wherever. And you have brownouts and it causes equipment damage and things of that nature. So emissions intensity, I'm sorry, may improve on paper, but absolute emissions still are massive. They're not really changing much. So it's not green, it's green tinted. But once again, green money is coming in there. So why does this narrative persist? It persists because it benefits everybody involved. The Chinese leadership, they look good. The local governments get GDP and jobs. State firms get contracts. Foreign investors get ESG credentials. Media gets simple, great stories about how the Chinese are wonderful. And the climate advocates can say, what a great success case. The only casualty in this entire thing is reality. And we know that that is not what the world news cycle is based on. China is not leading a clean energy revolution. It is leading a numbers revolution. It is a mastery of metric manipulation, capital attraction, and industrial capture. It controls a narrative regardless of what it does. It's always right. It's always striving to be perfect, but it's not by a long shot. Installed hardware is not the same as delivered power. Okay. And the scale without function is not leadership. So until the world stops confusing the appearance with performance, China's great green lie is going to continue to work quietly, effectively, and at everybody else's expense. So if you like that, like and subscribe. We are on YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, Substack. We have our own site, www.southfloridaconservative.com. The written pages actually have more stories and usually more depth because it takes a lot longer to do them. And if you have any ideas for a story that you would like to see, please send us a DM or whatever you want to do. and we'll be happy to look into it if it's within our wheelhouse. So that is about it for today. Have a good afternoon, and I will talk to you later.